Okay, let's just get started here. So Jeff kind of got us started with why we are here, when this happens, what we're going to cover. This is a high-level agenda. I'm not going to read it to you. You can see it there. So I need to let all of you know that I am an avid backpacker. Anyone who has hiked the PCT or the Oregon Trail or the Appalachian Trail would know potentially who this person is here. And just for the record, all of the images that I'm going to show here were generated using bing.com/chat. So in 1954, at the age of 66, Grandma Gatewood began to hike the Appalachian Trail. And well, at that time, very few people had completed the whole 2,300-mile trek. And the trail was very overgrown and really not well marked at all. So through hikers commonly got lost somewhere in Virginia or North Carolina with no maps or lightweight hiking gear. Grandma Gatewood helped forge much of the trail with a machete and slept on piles of leaves or rocks. So by the third time she completed the through hike, she was impressed how the trail magic people had put so much effort into making the trail system much more enjoyable and easy to navigate. So since 1973, when Grandma Gatewood passed away, the trail magic people have been greatly improving the entire AT through hike trail system. Also, lightweight hiking gear, which you can get from REI and other places, like my favorite is Garage Grown Gear and Gossamer Gear. They have greatly improved the overall productivity and enjoyment of hikers. While we respect the original trailblazers who manually built SQL and Oracle databases from scratch, the Microsoft Trail Magic engineers have fine-tuned what is called Dataverse based on Azure SQL to be a fully functional, interconnected database as a service, unlike anything else in the universe of data. From here, I'm going to hand it over to the awesome John Strawman.
Well, thanks, Daniel, for that intro. I don't know how many people would refer to me as awesome, but I do appreciate that. So again, Daniel, thanks for the story. I just learned something. I'd never heard of trail magic before, so very interesting. And I was kind of wondering if that was supposed to be a self-portrait of me there in that first picture. So I'm glad you clarified what exactly that was. So everyone, welcome and good afternoon. And of course, thank you for your time. At Microsoft, we greatly appreciate the time our customers spend with us, and we really hope that you get some value from this today. And our goal is to be here for you, as Daniel and Jeffrey both mentioned. So if something piques your interest as we talk, please reach out to the team in the chat. We are here for you. We can schedule a deeper dive at some point, because today we're going to be keeping things at a pretty high level. But we are here to do deeper dives anytime you want to discuss our solutioning platform. So welcome again, and I'm just going to jump in. So the meaning behind this slide, you can probably guess. Data is extremely important to every business today. Does anybody know what a zettabyte is, or a zettabyte? I'll give a second to put in the chat. We're doing the first poll in a minute, but that's actually my first question. So close, Remy, close. It's actually 1 trillion gigabytes. So there's 9 zettabytes of existing data across enterprises today, and I'm sure that's going up every day. The more relevant numbers to you as a customer and a user is that 68% of that data goes unused. When I see that, I think of all that data that's out there in our customers' databases, stored wherever, that could be translated into productivity increases or increased profits or lower costs. That data is like unmined gold. So Dataverse is part of the Microsoft solution platform that can hopefully help you mine it. Now, do I move the slide, Daniel, or are you on that? I think you have to do it. Next slide, please.
Yep.
So our first poll, where does your organization store their data today? And we'll let that get some answers going in there as we continue. Maybe give it 15 seconds, Daniel, and then move on. Please. I see the answers coming in. So I'm going to continue as people continue to type. So what is Dataverse? Well, the words on the screen are fancy. They sound great. It's too much for me. If you ask me, I just kind of went with our dictionary definition from Microsoft of what Dataverse is. What I tell people is it's basically a database on steroids. It's a scalable and secure data service platform completely integrated and connected to the Power Platform that facilitates interoperability between applications and services for our customers. It provides a secure and scalable environment for storing and managing data, enabling our customers to collect, store, and access data and provide actionable data and insights from those data storage areas. So that's what it is. It's a database on steroids. We're going to talk about all the out-of-the-box features. Just know that it's cloud-based, secure and scalable, completely managed by Microsoft to give you the opportunity to take action with your data. Next slide, please, Daniel. So why Dataverse? So this is where we start to talk about business value, and that's the most important thing. I mean, it's great to be able to say, yeah, we can store zettabytes of data, but why does that matter to you? Well, it's much more than just a traditional database. It enables our customers to leverage powerful, scalable solutions for data while taking advantage of the security and connectivity built into the Microsoft Power Platform. We can allow you to fully control, automate, and strengthen your business to provide ROI year after year. And the key term that I would say take away from this, and you'll probably hear this a lot today, is that it's more of a platform, a solution platform, than it is a traditional database. So with a traditional database, you might have to layer applications over data for security, business logic, and all kinds of things like that. But with Dataverse, there's a lot of things that you get right out of the box. And our next slide, Daniel, is going to show us that. So, bit of an eye chart. Just know that the reason why we put this up there is this is tremendous value for our customers. Starting on the far left, and I'm not going to go through every bullet point, folks. Don't worry, I'm not going to bore you with every explanation. But APIs, I'm sure everyone's familiar with that term. Application Programming Interface. The Dataverse API allows our customers to connect to data and the metadata stored in Microsoft Dataverse, via web APIs. So traditional like REST, which is representational straight transfer, or JSON, I forget what that means, JavaScript object notation, any kind of web APIs, anyone who's familiar with that, you can access Dataverse, I'm going to make that mistake all day long, but you can access Dataverse through those APIs. Or we can use all of these built-in tools to build applications or access data. So if you think of SQL Server as a comparison, SQL Server is a very, very powerful, scalable, cloud-based database server engine. However, when you deploy a SQL Server database, you get a blank database. You're responsible for tables. You're responsible for columns, column definitions, stored procedures, any views, security, all that stuff. Our customers have to configure that themselves. Now, we take care of the scalability and the high availability, but you're responsible for configuring all that functionality. One of the advantages of Dataverse is that there is a lot of out-of-the-box functionality, standard tables like accounts and contacts, views, things built in to relate those data elements within the database that you get right out of the box. We also have things like agility and data operations. So we seamlessly integrate with other Microsoft services and tools, as well as third-party tools. We have things like you see on the screen there, webhooks. So webhooks are another way that we can connect to our databases in Dataverse with other applications providing real-time information. And webhooks take that one step further, where we can receive notifications or changes for things within Dataverse. So something changes, we can use a webhook to an alert, maybe send out to the team, or alerted administrator that something has changed within that database. So as you can see, there's a lot of common features that come right out of the box. And the idea is that much like our copilots, which I'm sure everyone has had some exposure to, we want to help you along your journey. So whereas SQL servers kind of start with a blank canvas, Dataverse is starting with a canvas that's maybe 50% done. And then we provide what we call those low code or no code platform tools to allow your teams to get greater ROI. And at Microsoft, we use a term called fusion teams. And what that essentially means is what we call citizen developers, so business users who can contribute to applications, professional developers, people who write low-level code like C or C Sharp, and then IT administrators who are part of the process as well. This is what we call a fusion team, and tools like Dataverse and the Microsoft Power Platform make it possible for this diverse team, for everyone to have input on applications, which means greater ROI, faster to market, and a better overall solution for our customers going forward. So Daniel, please go to the next slide. And I was actually just talking about this a little bit because, as you may or may not know, Dataverse is the backbone of the Power Platform. So in addition to Dataverse, of course, layered on top of that, we have Power Automate for doing business automations. We have Power Apps where you can develop canvas apps, which are literally blank canvases, and you build a user interface, or a model app, which are actually built on Dataverse tables and data-driven. We have Power Pages for exposing Dataverse tables to the internet. And of course, Power Pages can be accessed via anonymous access, or you can have websites that have a lockdown area for, like, say, you have customers and you'd like customers to be able to update their own Dataverse record. That would be in a secure environment that only people who authenticate can get at. Power Pages enables that with point-and-click easeability. And Power BI, as you know, is reporting, analytics, metrics, very powerful Power BI tool that also can run on Dataverse. And then, of course, Microsoft Copilot Studio, which used to be Power Virtual Agents and is our data bot, kind of our chatbot functionality and technology. One other thing I'll mention is we do have a couple of or over 1,000 data connectors. They allow connectivity to other applications, other products that maybe aren't on the Microsoft ecosystem, to enable you to integrate to those tools if you need to as well. One last point, Dataverse is the data platform for, oh, sorry, Daniel, that's okay to go, but I was just going to mention that Dataverse is the full data platform behind Microsoft Dynamics 365. So if you're using Dynamics 365 for sales or project operations or customer service, you're already using Dataverse without even knowing it. And actually, those applications are an example of model-driven apps built on top of Dataverse. So we do use our own dog food, we use our own technology. So the whole point behind Dataverse is, how can we make this easier for you as a customer? How can we get you to have a better experience developing applications? So starting with that is, of course, it's the low-code backend. So as I mentioned, Dataverse is the backbone of the Power Platform, and it can be used in other applications as well. The reason why it's so powerful is we have made it easy to use with tools like Excel Power Query that enables discovering and refining data across a wide variety of sources. It's available in Excel, and it's also available in Power BI. So that's the whole platform ROI that we have for you as well, is that when you learn how to use a tool in one of our apps, you generally can then apply that across multiple applications. So it cuts down on ramping up for your teams. It gets you to market faster, enables you to be more productive. CDM is our common data model. So we can map entities to the UX for the user experience, and mapping Dataverse entities to those common data model entities on the back end. Transformations, if you're not familiar with transformations, in Dataverse, it's essentially modifying or preparing data for being used. So if anyone has looked at an old database, there's probably a lot of data in there that needs scrubbing. A really simple example I use is that an organization who hasn't standardized on data, which Dataverse can also help you do, maybe has 4 or 5 different formats for phone numbers, which is a really simple thing to think of, right? Some people might say area code .123.456. Some people might do area code in bracket and then 123-4567, et cetera, et cetera. Just think of all the different ways a phone number could be represented. With transformations, you can modify and prepare that data and be sure that that data is cleaned and it's ready to fit the schema and business rules that your organization implements, so that going forward you don't have any of that, what we call kind of, data is really, I hate to use a negative term, but it's almost the epitome of junk in, junk out. If the data is bad, then everything that's based on it is bad. So we provide those transformation tools to be sure that you can clean that data and make sure it adheres to your business best practices. And then lastly, another big benefit of the Power Platform for you as a customer is that reusability. So once you define templates or data models or anything like that, you can use it across the Power Platform, Power Apps, and other front ends. Next slide, please, Daniel. So I talked about this a little bit already. We make it as easy as Excel. And that's a key, because I've been using SQL Server for a long time, and then I transitioned to Microsoft Azure Code or Microsoft Azure SQL databases. So I'm familiar with tools like SQL Server Management Services. These are not trivial tools. You need to really know how to use a database, how to provision it, how to create tables and views and all that. It's not easy. So with Dataverse, we have made it a bit easier, where makers can literally go into the Power Platform centralized governance, just like Power Apps, and they can work with Dataverse right from that centralized governance and administration screen. So they can literally make columns, drag and drop columns right into a Dataverse table. They can create Dataverse tables. They can integrate other data using what we call data flows, and that again uses Power Query. Now, I want to just differentiate between data flows and automations, because we do use the term flow a lot when it comes to automations. So the best way to explain that is Dataverse data flows are really for back-end data operations, and they're aimed at maintaining data integrity and consistency, whereas automations are more about responsive workflows that enhance business productivity. And so that's a big difference. They both play crucial roles in managing data, but they have distinctly different needs that they serve. The last one I'll call your attention to, and I think I've got a slide on this, so I won't talk too much about it, is virtual tables. So with virtual tables, let's say you're building a Power App. I always like to illustrate things with an example. Some of your data is in SQL. You can go into Power Apps and specify that you want to access that SQL data within Dataverse as what we call a virtual table. It produces a one-to-one mapping to that SQL data, so that you can leave the data in SQL or move it to Dataverse, whatever you want to do, but it enables you to access that SQL database just like it's stored in Dataverse. So just one more tool to ensure ROI and speed to market for your application development efforts. One more, next slide, Daniel, please. So this is a very productive feature for our customers. I actually did this in a live demo the other day. So let's say you've got an idea for an app, and you've got an Excel table full of data that you need to build that app on. You can go into Power Apps, and as you see on the screen there, you can upload an Excel file, and Dataverse and the platform will automatically create that Dataverse table for you. It'll map the columns, it'll import the data, it'll do everything for you. Keep in mind that just like Copilot, it might not be 100% mapping the way you want it to. You can change it any way you want to. The key is that you can literally go from an Excel spreadsheet to an app in under a minute. And I've done this in front of customers, and it's really a, oh, wow kind of thing for productivity and ROI, because Dataverse handles all of the importing and design of the table for you, and then can actually map that right to a Power App on the fly. Next slide, please, Daniel. Oh, we need to do click there. These are actual videos. Yeah, thank you. So that one's playing. So just-in-time development environments, of course, because this is all managed and governed by the Power Platform, we can have environments, and it's a really good idea to use environments within your system. And just like traditional development, we've got maybe dev, test, production environments. Dev is where everyone can do anything. They can break things. You can have individual developer environments, and then you can also have test and prod environments. But just like we were talking about, the key is that Dataverse lets you start with data, build out your apps on the fly, and get you to market much, much faster. And then when that app has reached testing phase, you can use the built-in governance and solutions capabilities of the Power Platform and Dataverse to migrate that app to test. so that people, and that's what you see going on there. They're selecting different environments to build out these tables, and it just shows how those environments are completely self-contained. And the key is just to keep things compartmentalized so that nothing gets broken in production. It's always fully tested before it gets pushed to production. But the key, and you can also have multiple developer environments if you need them. It's just completely up to your business needs. Next slide, please, Daniel. And we did talk about data flows a little bit. So data flows, again, designed to import, transform, and manipulate data. I was actually doing this yesterday with an Excel spreadsheet I had come in from a customer, and it's a good example of automation versus data flows, because an automation was kicked off by the Excel sheet arriving in my email, and then I used data flows in Dataverse to import that data, and I had to do some manipulation of the data on the fly, which is what I used for the data flow and then I imported it into an existing Dataverse table as I went through the process. The key again is just that you can perform robust extract, transform, load capabilities. So some of you might have heard that term, ETL. You can define data preparation logic without writing code, and that's another big thing across this. We talked about fusion teams. We want to be sure that everyone in your team can contribute to these applications. Data flows can be scheduled. They support a variety of data sources, Excel files, SharePoint, disparate sources, all into unified formats in Dataverse. Just one more tool to hopefully make your lives easier and get you productive faster. Next slide, please, Damien. I got ahead of myself. I already talked about data virtualization, but this is just a slide that kind of shows how it works on the fly. So you see there that we can support OData or SQL or SharePoint lists, whatever data source you currently need to get to, we can support that. OData, just in case you don't know, I'm sorry, I'm always using acronyms. I try to explain them as I go. It's essentially an open source web-based data access protocol, allowing the consumption of RESTful APIs in a simple and standard way. It was actually developed by us, first released in 2007. You commonly see it used with protocols like HTTP and JSON, providing access to information from a variety of sources. So it really does, it adds to like interoperability and RESTful APIs. If anyone's ever done things in .NET code, you're probably familiar with OData. There are OData connectors that are in the .NET code. That stuff is still available in the Power Platform. The difference is we don't have to write code for it. Next slide, please, Daniel. I kind of already talked about this one too, but let's go a little deeper. So when we say customizations are easy, of course, that's a relative term. I think that anybody who knows how to use Excel probably can get by in Dataverse as well, because we do use some of the same tools. And anyone who's used Excel is probably familiar with the tabular layout of Excel with rows and columns. And when you look at Dataverse, in the management tools, it looks the same way. So once you set up a table, you get those customization abilities right within Dataverse, and adding columns is literally as easy as point and click. You give it a name, you give it a data set, you give it a data type like text or number, and it's available for your use. Now, plugins, I've been around Dynamics CRM for a long time, going back to the year 2000 when it first launched. And plugins were always these bits of code that we wrote, and we actually would deploy onto Dynamics CRM in the on-prem server. And a plugin is essentially a little bit of code that accomplishes a business task. Still there, it's under the covers. We support plugins. We have a library of them. You can build them yourself. They can access Power Platform and external systems. They're almost like what I mentioned before with the connectors. Plugins can all call into the connectors. They're just there for you to make your development efforts easier. We've got a plugin registration tool. So just think of them as little bits of logic that accomplish a task in a very fast manner. Next slide, please, Daniel. And then we've got Power Apps Copilot. So I'm sure everyone has heard all about Copilot lately. Microsoft has been talking a lot about this. Just for anyone on the call who hasn't had the differentiation, we have a variety of copilots, and they're part of virtually every product at Microsoft now. So in M365, we've got copilots to let you do things like summarize emails, or you can even go into Word and say, write me a story. Like I actually have a robot running every day that goes into Microsoft Copilot and generates a happy story of 100 words of less. And then I post it to social media. So if anyone's having a bad day, they can read my happy stories. That's an example of M365 Copilot. It works in conjunction with those applications. We also have Copilot Studio, which is, as I mentioned, for developing chatbots. And by the way, I was on the phone just before this with my colleague Remy, who's our Copilot guru, and he was mentioning we have a new capability. If you've used our AI tools or AI Builder at all, there's a new capability for grounding Dataverse tables using AI Builder and Copilot. Remy, if you would post that video in the chat, that would be fantastic. I'll give you a plug there because it's a really powerful new feature for our customers. And there you go. And it'll let you develop some things using AI very quickly. And of course, AI based on your data is more powerful than AI based on anyone else's data from the context of supporting your business. So that's our second kind of Copilot. And then we also have Copilots built into the Power Platform. So you can go into the Power Platform in Dataverse and say, build me a table to do XYZ, or build me a Power App that does this, 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 and this. And those Copilots will build those applications and tables for you, and it'll let you connect to that enterprise data that's stored in Dataverse. I'm going to say that caveat again because I'm trying to make sure we don't oversell Copilot. Just be aware that it probably won't do 100% of what you want, but if it gets you halfway there, then that's halfway further than you were when you started. So the idea is that we're trying not to have you just start at 0. We want to get you to 50, 60, 70%, and then you can start using your Fusion team to polish the app and get it to where you need to be to go to production. Next slide, please. I've only got a few more here, so. Auto-generated Power BI. So this is, I would again give caution here. Make sure you understand your licensing, but this is a very useful feature in some of our apps. And you see the video running there. When we are in a list view, so everything in a model-driven app, you may or may not know, is expressed as a list. So you go and you see a list of your accounts, or you see a list of your open opportunities. You can click that button that says visualize this view, and Dataverse and the Power Platform will build Power BI visualizations for you on the fly. It's generated by AI, and it provides insights into your data that you don't get from just a list. The advantage for you as a customer is you don't have to build these reports yourself. So think about building reports from scratch. Generally, a customer would have to open up visualstudio.net. Then they usually have to use a tool like JCharts, which is JavaScript charting, or you have to buy a package of charts from like Telerik or what's some of the other ones? Escaping my mind right now. But there are packages out there where these customers sell you these packages of reports that you then integrate to your data. With our solution, Dataverse, Power BI, Power Platform, it's all built in, it's all automatically connected. The security is governed by the Power Platform. So all you have to do is click that button and then play with the charts to manipulate the data to give you the reports that you want to provide ROI and business reporting back up the chain, which of course contributes to the overall profitability and efficiency of the business. Okay, Daniel, next slide. And I think we just have a couple more, and then I'm going to pass it to you to finish us off. And then we have a data platform for any data. I think we've been talking about this a lot. So whether it's relational databases in SQL or OData or wherever they're stored, or activities, files, Azure in a box integrations, process data for AI and business intelligence, the messaging here is that we can connect to and utilize and interact with any data, no matter where it's stored or how it's stored. Last two slides, Daniel, one more, and then we'll talk about governance. So I'm not going to go deep into governance today. This, again, is a topic that our team is here for you. If you want to talk about it in a more deep exploratory call, we can do that. The key behind the Power Platform and Dataverse is that it's all centrally managed. So when you set up your Power Platform deployment and your environments, all users, all security roles, access to applications, access to data, the rights to do anything. So what I mean by that is, can a user create database tables? Can a user create apps? all of that is governed right from the centrally managed Power Apps, what we call the Power Platform Admin Center. And we have all kinds of compliance, as you see there, leadership that we adhere to these standards. So things like FedRAMP High, which is it's a security level for the U.S. government. HIPAA is let me see if I remember this. Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, I believe. We adhere to the EU model. SOC, which I'm forgetting what that one means. I think it's Service Organization Control, and it is a set of standards on how you report data from within your organization. And then GDPR is General Data Protection Regulations. Of course, the message is we support a high number of security standards, and everything is managed from a single admin experience. And my last slide is next, Daniel. And I mentioned before how you can visualize your data in Power BI. Well, of course, we also provide incredible admin reporting and analytics in the Power Platform Admin Center right out of the box. You can build these dashboards, you can modify them. They're there for you, but the biggest value message for you is that they come out of the box, they're integrated with the Power Platform, and they provide insights into your data. So when we think back to our opening slide, 68%, or I think I got the number wrong. Was it 68% or 60% of data is unused in an enterprise? Hopefully what you've seen today from these slides and what you'll see coming from Daniel and David and Jeffrey is that we provide the tools so that you can use that data and get enterprise value out of it, take action on it, and drive business outcomes using Dataverse and our connected and secure Power Platform. So I thank you for your time. I think I went a bit over. Apologies for that, Daniel and Jeffrey. Hopefully we're not too far over. This is just exciting stuff, and there's a lot of information. Very hard to cram it all into a short time. So thank you, everyone, for your attendance today, and please do put your questions in the chat, and we are here to go further and have more meetings if you need. Sorry, was I supposed to point out that there's a poll there? I think everyone probably saw it. So.
All good, John.
So we'll just give a thank you, John, by the way. Great job. We'll just give a few seconds here for people to respond to this poll, and then we'll get jumped into when should you be using Dataverse. It's got lots of cool features, and John's highlighted its power, but when should we use it, really? Okay, so John actually had a much better version of this slide, I believe, so I'm not going to drag you through it again. But essentially, you see that it is Dataverse is a fully functional database as a service, providing much more functionality than SQL could ever hope to provide. So what are the primary use cases? Now, I thought it would be kind of fun, okay, to kind of talk about SharePoint and how it stacks up against Dataverse, because it seems like the common sentiment, and all of my peers would agree, we have conversations with customers every week who are running their business cases on the Power Platform backed by a SharePoint list. And we also hear about the challenges that are presented by such an approach. So with that, really it comes down to SharePoint definitely has its place. I'm not here to say that you should never use SharePoint, because it's an easy to use tool for when it comes to being collaborative. If you have collaborative productivity scenarios where your content is expected to be widely shared and edited by multiple parties, then that would be SharePoint. But Dataverse, however, is great for capturing the business data as operational records, and it's ready for audit and reporting use. And then in terms of the data scope, right? The data scope is pretty broad for SharePoint. It's recorded as what we call a list item in a SharePoint list, and users can use the SharePoint interface to access the data. And so the scope of that data access is intended to be broad. Dataverse, on the other hand, the data there is recorded as an entity record, and the scope of data is controlled by role-based access control. And so SharePoint offers pretty good support for unstructured content, like documents and images, while Dataverse content is generally expected to be highly structured, and still unstructured content is supported by way of file or image data types. And that is treated as part of the entity record. And finally, SharePoint is designed for heavy write operations for unstructured data like documents, and then mostly read operations for structured data like metadata. And Dataverse is designed for heavy write operations for structured data and mostly read operations for unstructured data. So let's talk volume, shall we? For storage of items with minimal CRUD operations, by the way, that's create, read, update, delete. We love our acronyms. SharePoint performs well with support for millions of items in a single list. Retrieval is facilitated by SharePoint search indexing, and then delegation issues do exist for apps trying to access these items externally from the list, which, by the way, is capped at up to 2,000 items for Power Apps. And so Dataverse, on the other hand, is backed by multiple Azure SQL Elastic pools. As John mentioned, Dataverse its foundation is Azure SQL, so tried and true data management platform. And so there's no theoretical limit on the volume of data that's supported in Dataverse. These Elastic pools will automatically scale as required. Anybody remember that avatar? That's one of the original Clippy avatars from the 90s. So in terms of the data model, SharePoint has a 12 lookup item per list, a limit there. Lookups provide a simple relationship by creating references from a list column. And so you kind of have limitations. And there's also limitations on what you can query. And you have to use XML-based CAML query, which is Collaborative Application Markup Language. Dataverse, however, implements what we call the Common Data Model, which is an open data model as part of the Open Data Initiative. And this model data describes common business entities with a common schema that's understood by any Microsoft business applications, as well as business applications from partners. So Dataverse also supports one-to-many and many-to-many relationships, which can handle complex relationships and what is known as polymorphic relations. And Dataverse also has powerful query operations, leveraging T-SQL statements or by using fetch XML. In terms of business rules and validations, so SharePoint calculates columns and validations using CAML formulas that run in the SharePoint front end and not behind the scenes at the back end. Therefore, it does not apply to external applications using the SharePoint list as a back end. Also, back end validation requires pro developer coding as what is called event receivers, and there is no native support for roll-up aggregations. So with SharePoint, you need to use event receivers, or ding, 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 Power Automate is required. With Dataverse, on the other hand, it fully supports configurable business rules through a business rule editor interface. Couldn't be easier. It also supports calculated columns and roll-up columns with aggregated functions for related records. And Dataverse provides full back-end data eventing capability through plugins with support by way of Azure SQL Bus or Event Hub. In terms of data and access, so SharePoint lists can be accessed from SharePoint's native interface or by any tools that are allowed to connect to SharePoint, like legacy tools like SharePoint Designer or third-party tools available on the internet. And then the data export to Excel is exposed as an end user function. When it comes to Dataverse, data access is available through the Power Apps Maker portal or by programmatic interfaces like REST API, which John talked about. No additional user interface access is available for front-end users except through Power Apps. And data export from Dataverse to Excel is done by Power Automate or using admin functions. And then the T-SQL endpoint provides read-only access for data professionals and uses existing tools such as SSMS, SQL Server Management Studio. And for data ingestion and migration, and by the way, this little baby Yoda sucking on a bottle was provided by bing.com/chat. So for SharePoint, ingestion of data is achieved by the use of third-party tools to import data from other sources, or by SharePoint PnP scripts or Power Automate. And with Dataverse, with Dataverse, ingestion is supported by Power Query, which, by the way, provides data shaping and transformation as an ETL tool. So let's talk intelligent processing. SharePoint, as you might guess, has no native AI capabilities built in. For intelligent analytics, data needs to first be extracted and loaded into another platform. And there's no direct query support. Data needs to be refreshed on a periodic schedule. Dataverse, however, possesses native AI capabilities built in via AI Builder. And AI Builder capabilities include prediction models, text classification, sentiment analytics, OCR, and others. And Dataverse links to Azure Data Lake with continuous refresh. That's pretty important, not having to manually refresh your data. And there is also direct query support in Power BI for real-time updates. Roles and permissions. So, as you might guess, SharePoint is very limited when it comes to any kind of low-level or row and field type permissions. It has limited low-level permissions. It supports item-level permissions, but definitely not recommended for more than 5,000 items. And you're going to run into performance issues if you try to enforce row-level permissions. No support at all for permission scoping. And there are admittedly some SharePoint roles through hierarchical scope, such as site collection owners, site owners, and list permissions, but very limited. And finally, with SharePoint, there are no field or column level permissions. Dataverse, well, it uses role-based access control. And that allows roles and permissions to be configured to support many different requirements. Also, Permissions can be scoped to individual users, i.e. their own record, to peers as a business unit, a parent, which is the parent of a business unit, and organization-wide permissions. And scopes are set to individual rights to create, read, update, delete, reassign, and append. And roles ensure that there is absolutely no unnecessary exposure of permissions. And field level permissions is supported. So clearly, Dataverse has the upper hand here. So in summary, to sum this up, both of these solutions have their purpose. If you want a collaborative platform with need to go through the data with co-authoring capabilities, your volume of data is small, you do not require item level permissions, you have no requirement for intelligent processing, and you have basic analytics and reporting requirements, then SharePoint may be sufficient for your use case. However, if you have data that needs to be created and updated frequently, and that data needs to grow beyond 5,000 records, and if you require role-based access control, if data access is only required by the application interface, and if you can benefit from AI capabilities, hello, and if you have a need for nearly limitless analytic reporting through Azure Data Lake, then Dataverse is for you. So actually, I think I'm going to do a demo now. Let's actually show this stuff in action. Okay, to everybody here, this should look somewhat familiar. This is a SharePoint list, and I have several thousand records in here. And there are relations to this data. So exporting this or doing something with Excel really isn't an option. Anybody that's tried to move from SharePoint to Excel has realized, wow, all it did was took my data with me, not the relations to that data. So what if we could just take this SharePoint list, which we clearly outlined its capabilities versus Dataverse, and actually convert it to a Dataverse table? Well, John talked about data flows. So let's leverage a data flow to take this SharePoint list and turn it into a Dataverse table. So I'll go ahead and click Create here. And of course, what I want to do is use a SharePoint online list. And all I have to do is provide a URL. So I go back over here, I'll copy my URL, come back here, paste it in here. And of course, I need to trim it down to the base URL, to the .com, and click Next. And look there. So data flows literally dissected the entire structure of my SharePoint list. And it allows me to customize what I'm going to import. So I'll go ahead and just choose this top level here. Let's transform our data. And already we get kind of a preview of what this is going to look like because it's a Power Query. Let's click Next. And here's where I can choose, okay, what sources in terms of columns, destination, I can customize this stuff. I can load a new table, or if I really want, okay, let's think about this for a second, okay? And be honest with ourselves. When we started building our SharePoint list, probably years ago, planning and scalability probably was not front of mind. So it's kind of just grown as it's needed to. Here we have the opportunity to load into a new table or an existing table. So you can actually predefine where this will land in a well thought out, hopefully governed from your center of excellence, a brand new, well thought out Dataverse table from which your applications exposed to users will be presented. So for this demo, I'll just choose load to a new table. And wow, we can actually refresh automatically. So as the data gets updated here, it automatically updates here. I'll just show this just to show something. And so it is publishing right now.
Hey, Daniel, while we're waiting on that, I just
Sure.
want to do a quick time check. We've got 5 minutes remaining, and
Okay.
I know David still had some customer stories that we can leave behind certainly if we need to, but just
No,
making
thanks
you
for
aware of
the
it.
yeah, thanks for the time check, Jeff. So essentially, I had a lot more I could show here, but I think everyone here gets the idea that the Power Platform is so impressively equipped to ingest data from any source, and the most common of those being a SharePoint list. And so you can easily import and convert the data into a Dataverse table, which introduces the governance, the role-based security, all of the AI capabilities that we described, and implement it on your data and expose it to applications that you can quickly create using Copilot, by the way. So with that, I'm going to let David try to talk through a couple of stories here.
Yeah, thanks so much, Daniel. So we've talked a lot already today about what Dataverse is, what the value is, when to use it. We have many customers here at Microsoft who are leveraging Dataverse for different solutions, both on large and small scales. And I just wanted to highlight a couple example of those just so you guys can understand what that looks like. And in all of these stories, obviously Dataverse being a data platform, it's not, an end kind of full up SaaS solution that stands alone on its own, but it's a part of a larger architecture that works together really well. So the first story here is around Kelly, and Kelly's in the staffing industry, and they do workforce solutions. So basically, the project that they were looking to roll out was they wanted to create customer portals for the different organizations that use them for staffing services, but they wanted each of these customer portals to be really bespoke, really branded, unique to each individual end customer. And they just understood that, building those sorts of portals with custom code and managing the backend infrastructure was going to be very expensive and very time consuming. So they ended up going with a solution that was built on Power Platform and, Dataverse, with all the value that it offers in terms of abstracting away some of the infrastructure management on the back end, and also creating having functionality to leverage the out of the box features, whether that's role-based access control, so that customers aren't viewing other customers' data, and all those sorts of things really fit the bill for what they were looking for. So currently they have over 7,000, almost 8,000 clients that have different customer portals that have been spun up with Dataverse running on the back end. Primarily, it's Power Pages on the front end, but they also leverage some model-driven apps as well. You might be able to click the link to read the full story, and we'll also send out the slides later so you can read through all the gory details. But effectively, right, if we think about what it would be to build this out with custom code, that's a number of months. And even when they first started leveraging low code solutions with Dataverse on the back end, they were able to reduce that down to like 1 month to deploy a new customer portal. And as they grew more familiar with the platform, they've now shrunk that down to a week, and in some cases, even less than a week, to deploy a net new customized bespoke portal for a new customer. So this is increasing transparency for their end customers. They're able to be more responsive and provide better customer service. They're able to provide self-service scenarios for their end customers. They don't have to manage as much infrastructure, particularly on the back end. They're able to run this team with fewer individuals. So a smaller staff team is required to support these customer portals. And they're also spending less time in damage control, and that's helping them be more proactive, more responsive, and ultimately drive up sales. So Kelly's had great success here. We'll jump to the next one, and I'll run through it super fast because I know we're at time. Microsoft, so we internally use Dataverse as well as some other Azure services as part of a larger solution. So we both own our own data centers, but then we also lease capacity from data centers. And the team that manages that whole process and does due diligence, particularly on our data center leases, they've deployed a solution that leverages Dataverse on the back end, both in terms of a backend for Dynamics 365 and then also layering some Power Apps on top. They've improved their cycle times for doing due diligence on our data center leases by 3x. And the old process was highly manual. They were doing phone calls and emails. They now have a lot more, reportability with data. And also just, the financial and legal consequences of getting something wrong in this space are pretty high stakes. So by having a better platform, a more responsive platform, they're able to, manage the leases better and avoid some of those pitfalls with having a really highly manual process that's hard and not particularly transparent. They called out that by leveraging Dataverse on the back end, they're also better positioned to leverage AI as they further iterate and improve the solution. So that's an example of Microsoft leveraging Dataverse for some of our internal solutions that we've developed for our own teams. And if we go to the next slide, there's just a couple quotes from some other customers. You'll see with the Rockwell Automation quote, they're really calling out the fact that they're able to be more agile. They're able to be very responsive to their business stakeholders. Blackmores calls out the fact that they're getting better time to value, and also they have that pro code extensibility. So you're not necessarily locked into a platform. Your data isn't in a silo by any means. And Ariva really loves the security and compliance offerings that Dataverse provides as well. So again, I know we're a little bit over time. We have this resources slide. So if you want to dive into training, read through documentation, see more case studies, pull some analyst reports, or read white papers, we have some links here. And again, we'll be sending out the recording and slides after we break. And additionally, our team is available for anyone who wants to line up a one-to-one, do a deep dive either on a specific use case or just understand more, have us talk through our experiences with Dataverse. Feel free to just drop a note in the chat and say, hey, I'd like, an in-person follow-up, whether virtual or in person. And then also just want to plug Microsoft Build. Microsoft Build is coming up May 21st through the 23rd. So there are going to be a whole number of announcements across the Microsoft cloud being announced at Build, including Power Platform. So if you haven't registered for Build, encourage you to do so. And our next master series will be a Build recap, specifically focusing on Power Platform announcements. Jeff Bennett and I will be leading that one. So if you're interested in getting kind of a condensed version, or you might, have conflicting meetings, not able to catch all the build sessions, you can also catch our Master Series build recap that we are ambitiously slating to deliver the last day of build. Typically, they're not doing announcements. They do announcements on the first 2 days. So we're going to try to condense everything and present back to you, turn that around super fast, and have everything hot off the presses. So yeah, you can hit those QR codes with your phone or follow the links. And again, we'll be sending out slides. So yeah, and just to double click on following up with anyone on our team or Microsoft account teams, if you're interested in that, drop a note in the chat or fill out the last poll question that we just threw up on the screen. So yeah, I'm seeing some comments in the chat. It is a bold strategy to be presenting a recap on the last day of the conference, but we'll see how it goes. So I've done a recap once before. It wasn't that fast of a turnaround. But we're ambitious here on our team. Thank you so much for your time today. Hope it was valuable. Hope it was insightful for you all. And we'll turn you guys loose. Keep an eye on your inboxes for slides and recording. Those should be landing generally 24 to 48 hours after we wrap, which is right now. So in the next day or two.
Thanks,
Thank
David.
you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.